I'm Kari with Babe. Sew and weft extensions can feel really overwhelming and challenging when you're first learning how to do them, especially if you've never worked with a needle and thread before. So in this video, I'd like to cover a few different things that will help you really secure the weft extensions and make sure that your thread is secure and won't slip or slide. So first of all, let's take a look at the foundation that we've put into the mannequin's hair. So for sew and weft extensions, you always want to make sure that you put a good solid foundation into the client's hair. We always choose to use a silicone bead to create that foundation. The reason why we like the silicone bead is because it's one of our strongest beads and will support the weight of the wefts during the wear time. It also has a silicone lining inside which will help protect the client's hair from any sort of damage or breakage. So as you can see, I've placed my beads right next to each other within the row. The maximum amount of hair that we would ever suggest you leave in between those sections is no more than a small finger space. So you can see on my mannequin here, I've placed them right next to each other with no gap between those sections. We also suggest that the section be about 2 lengths of the bead across this way and 1 length of the bead down this way. So in other words, it's a horizontal rectangle. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at how to begin the thread so that you can start the stitching. When you're ready to begin, one of the things that I like to do is to tie a slip knot in the end of the thread prior to putting the needle on so that the needle will not slide through. I like to tie a slip knot so that if I get tangled and I need to undo the needle quickly, I can just pull on the end of that thread and it will come undone. I also like to tie a little slip knot on the very end of the string as well. And I'll show you exactly how I'm going to use this right now. So to begin, all I'm going to do is take my needle and I'm going to go through the base section of the hair here on the left side of that bead. One of the things that people tend to do incorrectly is not cover the entire section with the wefts. So they'll start the wefts back in through here and start the thread farther back. What's going to happen if you do that is the thread, as the bead grows out, the thread is going to loosen and it's going to slip and slide. And that section or that bead will start to move. That can cause a lot of tension to be placed on the client's hair. So we want to make sure that this is completely covering that whole section of that bead. So then I'm going to take that needle and I'm going to go through that section on the left side of that bead. So I'm choosing to use a light colored thread for education purposes. Normally we would use a dark color thread that matches the weft. Now I feel like this is one of the hardest things that stylists have a problem with is figuring out how to tie the actual thread onto the weft and onto the client's hair to begin. So that's what my little slip knot's for. All I'm going to do is take that needle, slide it through that slip knot, and then just pull the thread nice and tight. And as I do that, it will attach that thread onto the hair, onto the client's hair, around the weft, and now I'm ready to begin my actual stitching. So it's not going to go anywhere. I'm not trying to fumble around or anything like that while it's clipped in place. So now I begin my actual knotting technique. Now, I'm going to do a quick demonstration here, but this video is focused mostly on the things that would cause you to have an issue with the knotting. So for more information about how to tie the actual knots, I would encourage you to check out our full certification video online. So here we go. I'm going to take that clip out of my way to start. Okay, so to begin, and the way we like to tie the knots here at Babe is to go through that section on the same side of that bead, and we go straight up and down. Now, one of the things that people tend to do incorrectly is they place that needle in on an angle. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. But we want to keep that needle straight up and down. Then we go through the loop and we pull this tight. Now, if you notice, I'm pulling straight up with my hand and with the thread. I never want to pull towards me with the thread. Doing that would cause the thread to rotate to the front part of the weft. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. So I'm going to pull that nice and tight, okay, making sure that that is really tucked in there. At the edge of the weft, to finish this off, you do have the option to go around that at a slight angle to tuck those wings in. So we suggest to do this at the beginning and the end of each one of your rows. So you can see I placed that needle coming through this way so that it's going to wrap around the edge and pull that nice and tight so that it's going to bring it in and kind of tuck it in towards the head this way instead of having it stick out like this. And that completes the first knot or the section to attach that to begin with. Now to complete this section along this bead, I would then take my needle and thread and I go on the right side of that bead, going straight up and down. Take that needle and thread and go through that loop. Now, if I pull it towards me this way, watch what happens to the thread. See how it wants to shift to the front part of that weft, and it would become very visible and it looks really bad. So we always want to pull it up like this so that it runs along the top part of the weft, not on the front part of the weft. To finish that off, I go straight up and down as well. Now, if I were to come in on an angle like this on every single section, then it would also create loops or stitches that come in at an angle as well. So we want to try to keep that straight up and down as much as possible. Again, really the only time we ever go in on an angle is at the beginning and at the end of that row. So I go through my loop this way and I pull it up. Okay, so that's what we want it to look like, running right across the top here, stitches in line with each other, complete knot. So this is not what we want it to look like. I'm going to demonstrate some of, again, the things that you would do incorrectly that would cause an issue. So coming through on an angle and then going through that loop and pulling it towards you like this. Okay. Then doing the same thing, going through either up and down or on an angle, just not making sure that you're going through it the same way each time, not being very consistent about how you pull that through, and keeping it on the front part of the weft. You can see it doesn't actually tie a really solid knot that way either, and that's because the thread is not in line with each other. So we definitely don't want it to look like this. Do this quickly here. So pulling towards me. See how the thread's on the front part instead of running along the top? It's going to sit right on the front part of that weft, and it doesn't look very good. It definitely doesn't look good with the light colored thread, but it wouldn't look good even with a dark colored thread. Okay, and then a lot of times too, making sure that we keep all those little hairs out of the way. So you can kind of see by going through on an angle, it makes that hair split as well. See how it creates a little bit of a gap right there and it causes the hair to split. That's from also not keeping your needle straight up and down and going around the same section twice. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and finish off the row demonstrating what it should look like, and then we'll recap in just a second. Okay, so you can see along the edge here, look at how nice that looks. You can definitely see the difference from where I did it incorrectly to where I started to do it correctly. Look how nice that looks. It runs right along the top, and you can see the knots tied just symmetrically in place and on both sides of the bead. Now, one of the things that we like to do is actually tie knots along the beads themselves. So a lot of other companies would do just what is called a loop stitch, which is where you take that needle and that thread and you just go through and around the section one time and tie it. and then you would move like that, and then you would move to the other side of the bead. The reason why we don't do it this way, why we actually go through it a second time and tie an actual knot, is so that if something were to happen to this thread, or let's say one of the beads slipped out, so the client were to catch it with something and one of the beads slid out or the thread broke, it would only go as far until it hit that next knot before it stopped. So if you do something like this, there's nothing, you can see even just when I release the tension on it, there's nothing to keep it from sliding back out of the client's hair. However, if I were to cut this and loosen it, it would only go back to where that last knot was tied before it stopped. So it's just extra security to make sure that it's going to stay in place. So I'm at my last section here. Turn her so that you guys can see. So I'm going to go ahead and complete that knot so that it's secure there. But then remember, as we are coming to the sides here, we want to make sure that we tie those wings in to the sides of the hair. So here's my last section. Here's my last bead. So the first thing that I'm going to do is make sure those are lined up properly with each other. Then I'm going to go through the section, and this is where I can come in on an angle. So I can wrap that needle through and around the section this way to create a knot that's going to go around the side and pull that in. So when I pull it back, I'm going to pull it back towards the head this way so that it will really bring it in and wrap that in. Now see this little tiny edge right here that's sticking out? That also can be folded back on itself. So you can tuck that underneath as you complete that last stitch and really make sure that it looks nice and pretty. So just tuck that little edge back in, or you can fold it back over on itself and wrap it around it as well. So we're gonna go ahead and do that to finish it up. As you can see, there are so many little tiny things that we need to pay attention to when we're sewing in weft extensions. Even the slightest thing can make that thread look good or bad and could create the slipping or cause the entire weft to fall loose from the client's hair. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.